there is this question on the mixed review practice for Unit 2 that asks which of the following is a false statement, and we'll go through these one by one and figure out which one's false. A says standard deviation is always a positive number because we squared the deviations in the first place. The deviations that would normally be negative, that would cancel out with the positives, those deviations then all become positive because what happens when you square a negative number? It becomes positive. So this is a true statement. So we know that that is not the correct answer. C actually says deviations are the difference between the data value and the mean of the data set, which is true. So the formula for deviation is that you take each element and you subtract the mean. Or if you're talking about a sample, you'll use x bar instead of mu. So this is true. So the deviations are the difference between the element and the mean. So since that's true, we're looking for a false statement. That is not the answer. A data set that contains 2 of every number has a standard deviation of 0. So if we have 2 of every number, and we can make up our own set of data here if you wanted to, which I'm going to do. Okay, so let's say we have this data set that we have even numbers between 2 and 14, and we are looking at 2 of each element, right? Okay, so it says 2 of every number, and it's saying that there's a deviation, standard deviation of 0. Okay, well the only way a standard deviation of 0, that you can get a standard deviation of 0, would be that if all of your deviations were actually 0. So we can kind of tell right off the bat, like, that is not true, right? So the only way this would happen if all elements were equal, so what would that look like? We would have to make sure that we had a set of elements that I don't know, I'm making up a number here. Whatevs. So this has a standard deviation of 0 because all the deviations are 0. So the standard deviation is going to be 0 as well. But in a case of the actual statement, it says that the data set contains 2 of every number. So I'm going to put these values in L1. And I made values up. Okay, so I just made this up out of nowhere. So when I put these values in L1, there's 2 of each type. And I find the mean is going to be 8. And the standard deviation is actually going to be 4. So we're looking at the fact that we do have deviations here, right? So when we're looking at the deviations, like this value has a deviation of 2, this value has a deviation of 2, so there's 4 elements that deviate 2 spaces. There's 4 elements that deviate 4 spaces. There are 4 elements that deviate 6 spaces. So all of those deviations are going to actually contribute to the standard deviation formula, and you're going to end up getting 4 as the standard deviation. So this is actually a false statement. So this would be our answer choice. This one says the sum of the deviations in any data set is 0. This you should key in on because that is always true. Always 0. This one's true. So the only way we're going to get a standard deviation of 0, is if all of your values were the same. So if you put these 5s in L1, and I suggest you do it, I'm just doing it. I know it's going to be 0, but I'm doing it anyway. Okay, these elements have a deviation of 0. So the mean is 5. Color change. And then the standard deviation and both standard deviations actually are 0. Because every time you find a deviation, all these elements are 5, you're going to take the element minus the mean, and you're going to do 5 minus 5 for each and every one. So be careful about that one. Something about that is going to come up on the test.